Today on the Terrible Warriors, we just got back from our very first trip to GenCon, and we had a great time. Holy smokes, that's a good time. And of course, we made sure to make some time to visit the ENnie Awards and see who's going to walk away with the prizes this year. And to our amazement, but not our surprise, Free League Games walked away with 6 ENnie Awards, including Best Cartography, Best Rules, Best Production Value, and a silver for Product of the Year, of course. We're talking about Forbidden Lands. I'm never going to stop talking about Forbidden Lands. The day after the ENnies, that Saturday morning, I made my way to the Free League booth, weighed down by the weight of their medals, and I spoke to company founder and game designer Tomas Härenstam to ask, how are you feeling this morning?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, we had some nominations, so of course, but you never know these things. So we really didn't know what to expect, and it was so much fun for the team and all the freelancers we'd worked with, and for me as well. I mean, and just that 2 years ago we were not here, we were not at GenCon, we were back home, and we had no idea that what was going to happen with Tales from the Loop, which won a bunch of awards 2 years ago. And then I watched it on, YouTube and I really kicked myself for not being there. And it is just because I was thinking like this is something that happens like once in a lifetime to have like multiple awards for your game at GenCon. That's not something that's going to happen very, very often. It might never happen again. It was like, and I was not there. So it's like, God damn it. So that, considering that, it felt particularly great to actually get a chance to experience something at least similar to that right here. So that was great.
Yeah, the first time it was the Cartography Award was the first one of the night,
yep.
And that's something I know on the show I have gone on about on just the artwork from Niels and the map that's used, and it's a very well-deserved award, and so congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, and the map is such a key part of the game, so I felt felt so right. I felt like when we got that, it's like, I'm happy. I mean, this is great, because at least they got it. I mean, the map is so key to the game, and the guy who designed it, his name is Tobias Trunell. He does an amazing job. So I was happy for him as well.
How has it been like now to see that an indie publisher like yourself getting recognition next to some of these institutional giants?
I mean, that was pretty cool too. I mean, I met the people from Chaosium yesterday at the show, and I met some of them earlier as well. And just to have them come up and say like, we're huge fans of your games. I mean, that's pretty cool. Just that alone. And also, I met Graham Davis, who was working on Warm Offensive Roleplay 4th edition, and he also worked on the 1st edition. And I loved that game back in the late 80s, and I played the whole Enemy Within campaign, and now he's working on the new version, and he's coming up talking to us, That's pretty cool. I mean, just getting that recognition.
I had a somewhat similar when I was going to approach you and congratulate you, and Mark Diaz-Truman from Magpie Games came up, and he was like, I love your games. And it was just this whole sort of, we're all just gamers, and we just love playing everyone else's games, and it's just, we're all geeking out, we're in the same room with each other.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I think everyone I've met here has been so gracious, and so, there's been, even no matter if you're from a big company or just a tiny one or just visiting, I think there's such a sense of community here that I think is awesome.
So now there's the other one that won the award, Symbaroum. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I think Symbaroum. I think they want to emphasize the last syllable, and I say I think because I did not design that game, and I love it, but it's not my baby.
That's from the other company that merged recently with Free League.
We merged with Team Jernringen, they're called. That was their game. We know them from way back. Actually, that was actually one of the reasons that sort of pulled me hardcore into gaming again after a brief period of not gaming so much, like 15 years ago, is they made a game that was based on the Mutant franchise, the same as the Mutant Year Zero, but an earlier version that was only done in Swedish, but that was popular in Swedish like 15 years ago now. Yeah, around there. And that's kind of pulled me in, and I started freelancing and doing some work for that game, and that's actually how I got back into role-playing and also got to know these guys. Then they went out of business for a while, and we took over some of their projects. Coriolis, the first edition of Coriolis was done by them.
That's what I just heard today.
Yeah. So they made the first edition of Coriolis also only in Swedish in 2008, I think. But then they went out of business. and they asked us to take over some of their projects, including Coriolis, which we took over. And then a few years later, we made a completely new edition of Coriolis, but the setting is the same. So the setting is the one that they designed originally. And then they restarted their company in a smaller fashion a couple of years ago, and their new game is Symbaroum, which is a dark fantasy game. Really beautiful art, a very evocative setting, so it's a great game. And we have been talking for a long time about working together, and we have really grew pretty quickly. And I think we realized we have a joint history together, and it just made sense to work together. And we were just trying to find a way to do that. And in the end, we just realized it actually makes more sense to just join forces and just merge our companies. So now we're all Free League, and they're part of the family. So that's pretty cool too.
The league becomes Legion.
Yes.
We'll bring it back to the products you're familiar with. Another one of the things that won the award last night was the rules for Forbidden Lands.
Yeah.
Recently, I've had the opportunity to play the starter kit for Alien, the RPG.
Right, yeah.
And Alien's the big one coming here on the horizon. Yeah. And it uses an adapted rules using the same engine that Forbidden Lands uses.
Yeah.
And with changes there with the way stress is handled. And, I mean, we want to talk a little bit about why the choices you made for Forbidden Lands versus the choices that were made for Alien.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing. We use the same core engine, the Year Zero engine we call it, but we really need to adapt it for the game, and that just not minor tweaks. There are significant changes. For Forbidden Lands, what we did there, we wanted a game that was still still fast and easy to use, but a bit crunchier than for example, Tales from the Loop, which is probably with the least amount of rules crunch. We wanted to give more focus to melee combat to get the sense of that, and we also wanted the survival aspects from that are close to Mutant Year Zero, so we wanted to get that in there. And of course, the travel rules are a big part of Forbidden Lands, so that's there. We developed the talent system further. The earlier games only have talents. You either have them or you don't. The Forbidden Lands has tiered talents, so you can have ranks 1, 2, or 3, so that also changes things a bit. So that was how the thinking for Forbidden Lands is to get a feeling of a really hardcore, dangerous system with fair bit of crunch, specifically regarding melee combat and stuff like that.
It's still making it approachable.
Still approachable. I mean, that's core. I think, that's core for all of our game systems, that the core is so very simple. Roll some dice, get 6s, and the more you get, the better it is. I mean, that's really so super simple.
When you're looking at Forbidden Lands, because it has such a love for its source material from origins of things like Dungeons and Dragons from those early years, that it's allowed to be expected that, I want there to be some feats and some magic spells and a little bit here and that progression with experience.
Yeah.
But then taking an extra step and going, we're going to damage your stats directly.
Yeah.
And you don't have hit points. No. You're just going to get tired and weaker, and your numbers are going to drop, and it's brutal.
It is brutal, yeah. And it's sort of and that's really goes to the survival aspect of that game, that getting hurt and pushing yourself hard, you'll need to do that, but it will wear you down.
And it creates this immersive experience where looking at if it was just HP ticking down, you don't feel that the same way you do when your strength goes from a 5 to a 4.
Yeah.
And that's just 1 point, and it feels like such a big deal.
Yeah. And that thing particularly was implemented in Mutant Year Zero. That's already there, which was the first incarnation of the game system. So I would say Forbidden Lands and Mutant Year Zero are the closest. But then in many ways, Forbidden Lands, the system there is like an evolved version of Mutant Year Zero, where we tweaked a lot and developed it further, streamlined things, and it's really, if we would do an entire new edition of Mutant Year Zero, we'd probably borrow some stuff from Forbidden Lands.
Oh, maybe we'll be getting a Mutant Year Zero edition, second edition.
Maybe, we'll see.
So going forward into the Alien RPG, which you've announced, what were some of the challenges you were facing when you were decided this is the engine we're going to use, and we're going to set this to the setting? Because there's no traveling really in Alien. You're the whole point is you're trapped on this a haunted house in space, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That was we had lots of discussions about this early on, sort of what kind of system, we knew pretty much that we wanted to use the Year Zero system because we think it's a system we know well, it's tested well, and I think it would work for Alien. So we decided pretty early on to use it in some form. We looked a lot at Tales from the Loop, which is of course very different from Alien, but the similarity is that Tales from the Loop works really well in a short format, also like online streams and stuff, but also just on cons, or it works in that compact format. And we felt that would work.
Pacing is very television cinematic. It's going to change scenes often, and a lot of things are resolved all in one go.
Right, and we wanted something. That was an inspiration to sort of use some. It should be more crunchy than Tales, but still have some of that really hard-hitting, very accessible, very fast system. So what we decided to do is to sort of keep it very simple, but then introduce this one key new mechanic, which is the stress dice and the stress mechanic. But really, that is the one big thing that we introduced, and everything else is fairly streamlined. So we didn't add a lot of crunch on other bits. And of course, there are rules for explosive decompression. There's always even rules for space combat and all kinds of stuff. But the key core
the air supply in your suit, right?
There is rules for that too. So I mean, there's definitely stuff there, but the core system is very fast.
It's a horror, and having stress being the focus. Yeah.
So you don't want a horror experience. You have to be really careful not to overload that with rules crunch, because then you're pulled out of the immersion really quickly. So we thought for any horror game, whether it's in space or not, this rule system needs to be very unintrusive, so you can really focus on the feeling. And so we used the stress die as the key tool to really promote that rules-wise, but leave the rest out. Just keep it simple.
I found in my 2 sessions that I've run so far, seeing that stress, the pool physically grow in size, and feeling the tension and that panic, like viscerally on the table. And there was this you allow the players to know, like their characters with the setting after Alien 3, they're allowed to know that there are monsters out there to a degree. So they don't even have a bit of deniability. So they're like, well, we don't want to go in there because there's monsters. Monsters are real. Yeah. They don't want to get out of their suits, and they don't want to breathe the air, but the air is ticking down each time. Like, you're going to have to take your helmet off eventually. Yeah. And every single thing is just full and dripping with dread. Yeah. And I loved it. I loved how afraid they were when the ship, there's a ghost ship, and you have to make that first choice of boarding it. Yeah. And you have to make it, I mean, of course they have to board it, you have to have an adventure. Yeah. And so, but the feeling of them being like psychologically kicking and screaming all the way in, going, we have to do this. I don't want to. How have you found the reactions? Because you've been doing playtests of Alien this weekend as well. How have people been responding to this?
I mean, so far, I've only heard, it's been going great. I mean, I think the response has been fantastic. Also some suggestions of tweaks to make, that too, which is great. But I mean, overall, the response has been great. And it seems like people have been enjoying themselves in a horrible way. Can
I ask, how did this come around? I know it's the 40th anniversary of Alien, and Free League, you do, like, the quality of your work is phenomenal, and yet Alien, it was such a wonderful surprise to see one of my favorite publishers end up with such like a prestigious property sign up with them. How did that come around?
Well, there's a long story, I guess. I mean, it started out with, we just had like a brainstorming session like a year and a half ago, I think, in the winter. Just sort of thinking what would be like the dream properties to work with. Because we have an idea that we want to do our own brands, our own IP, so to say. We wanted, that are fully our own from the ground up, like Forbidden Lands and Symbaroum, and there will be more of those. But then we also want to work with, like, other existing properties that we really love. And we just made, like, for fun, pretty much, a top 5 list of those would be like the dream properties. And Alien was was on that list for sure. And then, just by coincidence, a couple of weeks later, I happened to have lunch with somebody who worked with someone else, and we started talking about this, and I came into contact with a guy whose name is Joe LaFavi. He runs a company in Hollywood called Genuine Entertainment, and his job is to sort of broker these kinds of deals. And this person just gave me his email, and I just contacted him, and I had no idea what that would lead. But it turned out he was a huge fan of Tales from the Loop. So he knew our stuff really well, and he was a super fan of our games, just personally. and we just hit it off, and it turned out that he had been working with 20th Century Fox on the Alien franchise for other things, and he knew that there was an opening to do this, and he approached them, and of course we talked to them, and we made a proper pitch, a big pitch with what we wanted to do, and presented it to them, and then the ball started rolling, and eventually here we are.
Here we are. The starter kit is out. The cinematic mode is the campaign you play. It's all very pre-generated. As Alien comes out later this year, what are some of the things that we can expect in that core book that we can get excited about?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, the cinematic kit is it's focused on that cinematic experience. So it doesn't even have character generation rules because you get the characters that are already done. But the full game, we are focusing a lot more on the campaign play, where you can really explore this universe. And I think there is so much more there than you might think if you've only seen the movies. Those are, I mean, they give you a lot, but it doesn't really tell you that much about the greater world. But there is a lot of expanded universe stuff, and we have really dug into that. And our main setting writer, Drew Gasky, he's been a franchise consultant for Fox on Alien, so he knows this stuff super well, and he's really been, so even if you're not even a role player,
you've even mentioned stuff from Isolation, the video game, and sort of there's so much little Easter eggs that you can find.
There are millions, and so I think this book will be fun even for someone who is not even a role player but enjoys Alien, because it'll be a huge source book for this universe with great art and everything. But of course, it's mainly a role playing game. But yeah, there is in the core book there are extensive descriptions of life in space, life in this world. There are space travel, space combat. There is a lot about. We have a big chapter on systems and planets, space stations, and colonies across in the different parts of charted space. There is a big chapter on corporations and governments. I mean, everyone knows about Weyland-Yutani, but that's just one of of several powerful corporations, and there are also governments that are present and doing stuff, and those are described in some detail. And of course, the Xenomorphs themselves, there's a big chapter on that. There is campaign locations. There's like a space station that you can use for campaign play. There's also a short introductory scenario. That's actually the one being played here at GenCon right now, called Hope's Last Day, because the Chariot of the Gods that is included in the starter PDF, we were going to have that in the main book to start out with, but then we realized this book is going to be too thick. So we're now going to publish that as a separate book, and everyone who pre-orders gets that too. So no one's missing out on anything. But because the core book will be 392 pages anyway, even when we cut out the big scenario.
Yeah, it's a big book.
It is a big book. It's the biggest book we've ever done. I'm not sure that's a good thing in itself. I mean, I think RPG books should be concise, but this is 392 pages of really great stuff. So
you're condensing this entire franchise into a single book, and if you were to cut anything out, I mean, fans would be like, well, you can't have da 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 da.
Exactly.
I understand, and that's where you're coming at it. I think it's just going to be a great collection. Same way I enjoyed what Modiphius did with Star Trek Adventures. I don't play that game nearly as often as I read the books because I'm just such a big fan of the property.
Sure.
So coming off of Alien now, and I mean, you mentioned your original properties, and I think it's telling that it's Forbidden Lands and Symbaroum who won the awards at the ENnies, and they're your original creations. When we meet up again this time next year at GenCon, what are some of the hopes that you have that we can be talking about?
Oh, you never know. Of course, by then, Alien will be out. So, of course, we hope that will be received really well. So, you never know about these, awards things. It's impossible.
It's a popularity contest. No, I get it.
So, but, of course, we hope for a good reception of Alien. We have a couple of more surprises up our sleeve. Some other games we'll be announcing in the fairly near future. So we'll see. They will not probably be released by next Gen Con, but they will be, out there in some form. So that's also going to be interesting to discuss down the line.
Tomas, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on this successful weekend. Enjoy the rest of your time at Gen Con.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thanks again, Tomas Härenstam, for spending time with us during our busy Gen Con weekend. To find out more about Free League games, be sure to follow them online at Twitter at FreeaLigan. The link is in our show notes if you want to get the exact spelling. Alien the RPG is coming out later this fall, and you can bet that we're going to be playing it here on the Terrible Warriors. And next week, we continue with our time at GenCon as we went right next door to their friends at Modifius, where we got to have a conversation with company CEO Chris Birch, the director of RPGs Sam Webb, and freelance writer on Star Trek Adventures, Aaron Pollier. He's back to talk about the Alpha Quadrant book in the Star Trek Adventures line. To find out more about what is happening here on the show, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Dice Warriors. We've got our schedule now figured out to the end of the year, including these Gen Con interviews that we have. We also have our Meet the Maker conversations that we did back at Breakout. We're going to continue to release those in November. Why so long? Because we're going to get back to some actual play RPGs in September with Magpie Games' Root, and in October with Lucian Khan's Visigoths vs. Molgoths. Both Kickstarters happening back to back. So why don't you come along, listen into these games, and make sure they get made. This entire shebang is only possible because of supporters from our Patreon page at patreon.com/terriblewarriors. Their support ensures we get to keep making this really cool show. You also get postcards in the mail, you get those exclusive debrief episodes, as well as access to our Twitch TV archive, and higher up that tier ladder, we run private games every single month. And for the summer, we have been running our Patreon supporters through the games we will be playing on Terrible Warriors, so you really get to be a part of the development of this show. This month, there's still time to sign up for Magpie Games Zombie World. Go to patreon.com/terriblewarriors if you want to know more. Until we meet again, dear listener, thank you for listening to this show. Thank you for telling games set in your worlds of your own creation. Thank you for opening up your table to new players. Thank you for becoming a terrible warrior.